see so many people making mistakes when driving going to the Sun Road, and we're going to keep you from doing that. Hey there, my name is Alex from Alex on the Map, and I grew up right by Glacier National Park, so to say I know going to the Sun Road pretty well is, yeah, I know pretty well at this point. I think I can't tell you how many times I've driven it and seen people make mistakes that maybe have kind of ruined the whole experience for them. I also want to start out this video by saying you will need reservations to drive going to the Sun Road in 2024. I have a whole video about that breaks down all the information you need to know, so you're definitely going to want to check that out after you watch this video. Alright, I'm going to give you my top 5 tips for driving the road, including some information on how large your vehicle can be, whether or not you should fold those mirrors in, and a lot of other stuff. Alright, enough talking about it, let's jump right into it. First and foremost is making sure that your car is ready to go and take on the road. I plan national park itineraries and I often see people bringing their own cars, and they may or may not be fit for such an intense road. Whether you are renting a car or you are bringing your own, it's good to know the size that you should bring on the road with you because there are some limitations. These are 21 feet long, including your bumpers, 8 feet wide, including your mirrors, and 10 feet high, including any cross beams you might have on your car. So this means a lot of large size RVs are just not going to be able to make it up the road, and no trailers are allowed either. So you're either going to want to rent a car the day you plan on driving, or just make sure that your car fits within those parameters. Another thing to keep in mind is that there are no gas stations between West Glacier and East Glacier on the road, so you're going to want to make sure you have a full tank right before you get started driving. This also means that old beater cars that you're not sure whether or not they'll make it up the road, it might be better to rent a car for those few days, just because there's going to be very little towing services or anything to help you kind of get that car back going, and then you're just going to back up the whole road and it's going to be a whole issue. Another thing I will also mention is that there is construction on the west side of the park this year, so if you are concerned about getting dings to your car and you don't want anything bad to happen to it, then this might not be the best option either. Again, you might want to consider looking into a rental car or just acknowledging that this is a risk. Here's the thing I feel about side mirrors. If you are a small car, you're probably going to be just fine. Even I would say like a mid-size SUV, you're going to be totally okay. However, if you are one of those large pickup trucks, folding your mirrors is a really good idea just so you don't scrape on another car or on the rock on the other side of the road. My number 2 tip is check for road conditions before you go. I mentioned construction earlier on. That is something that you're going to be dealing with this year. But another thing to keep in mind too is that sometimes they open going to the Sun Road early, which it seems like they're going to do this year because the snowpack is less. But then it snows again and then you run into that issue all over again. So keeping tabs on the Glacier National Park website, they have a whole page solely devoted to going to the Sun Road and the plowing status. Knowing that beforehand can make a big difference before you just head out on the road. You end up starting up it and then they stop you halfway. You're also going to want to know too that going to the Sun Road typically doesn't open to cars until the first week of July. I do think it will be a little earlier this year in 2024, just because we didn't get the same amount of snow that we usually do. And it also closes usually the last week of October or when the snow starts flying again, whichever comes first. My number 3 tip is knowing where you want to stop. I don't know how many times I've been on the road and someone can't make up their mind whether or not they want to take a stop or if they want to keep going, and it's just a lot of back and forth and confusion. So knowing beforehand where you plan on pulling over, seeing the scenery, and getting back on can make a huge difference for you because you're not going to be as stressed out, but also it makes it easier for everyone else too because they can clearly see if you're pulling off or not. Plus, if you have any hikes planned like the Avalanche Lake hike or the Highline Trail, those parking lots can fill up really fast, so you might want to actually get to those first, do the hike, and then drive the rest of the road. That just makes it so much easier because you know you'll have parking in the spaces that you want for your hikes. So going into it with a clear game plan instead of just driving the road can actually be really helpful if you don't want to be stressed out while doing so. My number 4 tip is starting early, and there really isn't a time that's too early, to be honest. I've driven the road around like 4 a.m. sometimes, and it's actually really beautiful, and you're more likely to see wildlife in those early mornings than you are later in the day. If you want to totally bypass the reservation system this year, entering in before 6 is a good idea anyway, especially if you need to get up to Logan Pass and you want to hike early, just because then you're more likely to get that parking space you would like. Number 5 is drive carefully and observe the speed limit. And this always just seems to be, no one seems to care, but it is really important, especially because the road is pretty windy and pretty narrow. So if you are looking in a whole bunch of different directions and not at the road itself, then it can be really easy to end up in the other lane or maybe a little bit too close to the wall and scraping your car. Definitely recommend taking it slow, even if you are getting pressure from cars behind you to go faster. Most of the road is from 25 to 45 miles an hour, so you can't just book it up and book it back down again. You do have to take your time. And always, I recommend if you don't feel like driving it at all and you want to see the beautiful scenery, go ahead and take the Glacier National Park shuttle. It's free, you don't need a reservation to get into the park, and then you can just look around and enjoy the scenery without having to drive yourself. I fully recommend checking out my blog post on this topic, linked in the description below, just because it has 5 more really important tips I think that will be helpful for you on your drive. I hope some of these tips have been helpful for you and will help you feel a little more confident when taking on this drive when you are in Montana and Glacier National Park. Feel free to hit the subscribe button and the bell notification because I'll be updating you on national parks like Glacier and a lot more.